Hello, good evening and welcome to Iron Port here on Metropolitan Television. Iron Port is proudly brought to you by the Ghana Revenue Authority, Goil Company Limited, Serene Insurance, Ghana Link Network Services, and indeed the latest kid on the block, Meridian Port Services, MPS. The show is proudly powered by the Ghana Ports and Harbours Authority, GPHA. Now, the show is streaming live on our social media pages. On Facebook, we are streaming live at Ghana Ports and Harbours Authority. Ghana Ports and Harbours Authority. And still on Facebook, we are streaming live at Port of Tema. On YouTube, we are streaming live at Iron Port Ghana. Our media partner on this journey for a lifetime is the Business and Financial Times, the BNFT. Now, if you want to have a grasp of all that transpired in the show tonight, make a date and grab a Thursday edition of the BNFT, and you'll be able to see all that happened here on the show tonight. As usual, we're going to be getting interactive with you, and all you have to do is send us your messages and comments ahead via our dedicated WhatsApp line, which is 0559-019-177. 0559-019-177. At the appropriate time, which I'll share it with the rest of the world. Indeed, when I pick signals from the production team that the time is ripe, I shall activate the phone lines for you to call in and contribute to the discussion. My name is Kennedy Mona. We are going for a quick break. When we bounce back, we'll continue with the show. Please do stay with us.
Every now and again, Goil makes good things happen. This time, Goil has introduced Super XP Ron 95, a higher grade fuel loaded with additives and yet sold at the same price as normal fuel. Goil Super XP Ron 95 enhances engine performance like never before. It maintains the engine by keeping it clean from carbon deposits. Goil Super XP Ron 95 is designed to burn slowly and thus improves fuel economy, making you save money after several kilometers. Goil Super XP Ron 95 gives you a smooth driving experience, that is, less vibrations. Fill up with Goil Super XP Ron 95. Now there's no need to pay more for any higher grade fuel. Goil has that sorted. Goil, good energy.
Electricity, then pay your taxes. Our taxes, our future.
Because you see, without our taxes, we wouldn't have good roads, good schools, better hospitals, street lights, and other very important social amenities. When we pay our taxes, we give our children free and quality education. Talga, my money too small. Why should I pay my tax? Look, small. Salifo, it doesn't matter how small or big your business or income is. You still have to pay your taxes. The little taxes from each and every one of us, when put together, could give your community clean water or that deprived school with tables and chairs. Please pay your taxes. It is your responsibility. It is your civic duty. It is the law.
Impressive factory. If only I had listened to you, I wouldn't have been in this mess. That devastating fire virtually wiped out the whole factory and my warehouse.
Remember my misfortunes last year? Serene Insurance Asset All Risk Fire policy that I took were there to pay for my damaged stocks in the warehouse, and my machines that were affected by the floods have been replaced. My accident vehicle is back on the road thanks to Serene Insurance Motor Policy. Currently, my goods are on the IC covered with their marine cargo insurance policy. I was just telling Ajima about Serene Insurance.
Oh, Ajima,
tell him more.
As a road contractor, I make sure I do my contractors all risk insurance
for the project, and then workers' compensation for all the workers on site. With Serene Insurance, they will make sure they will cover your unknown tomorrow today.
Serene Insurance, a new face of insurance. Call us now.
Mps Terminal 3 is Africa's new state-of-the-art container terminal at Tema Port. For manufacturers, agro-processors and traders, the new port means business can be done faster. This infrastructure boost will improve Ghana's port handling capacity, connect more trading routes, and oil the engine of growth for the economy, creating greater opportunities across all sectors as Africa's markets merge and become the largest trading bloc globally. MPS, we connect, you thrive.
All right, so you're welcome back. It's now time for us to take a look at happenings in the port and shipping industry in the course of the week. And in the course of the week, the Association of Customs House Agents Ghana, ACHAG, paid a working visit to the Paga border to familiarize themselves with operations there. And we also have a new shipping line in the country. That's the agent, SACO Shipping Agency. It's in Ghana, and they have launched their new office in the port city of Tema. We shall bring you that story as well. Plus the fact that GPH also picked up an award at the just ended Ghana Made in Ghana Awards. So let's take a look at these stories and more.
The Association of Customs House Agents Ghana, ACHAG, has paid a working visit to the Akanu, Segbe, and Aflao borders to familiarize themselves with the customs clearance processes. Akanu is a joint border between the Ghana and Togolese customs, which serves as a one-stop shop border post for customs clearance.
We are supposed to work together, a one-stop border point, so that when the items come, this one will not do something different before the other person doing something different. And the problem here today, are more interested in imports that go to their place, and we are also interested in our revenue, the imports that comes here. But as a joint border, we are supposed to do everything.
The visit saw the executives and members of the association interact with customs officials stationed at Akanu, Segbe, and Aflao borders on issues of mutual concern. They were briefed on how customs is facilitating trade at the borders. Whilst the customs officials appealed to the association to help them maximize revenue, the association also appealed to the customs officers to help in the speedy clearance of goods at the borders.
My question is for this: how do the association intend the authority to maximize?
Honestly, when it comes to this particular association, we make all effort that through our educations, we give the right quantity to customs, we give the right description to customs, and we don't maneuver in those forms of acts being done by some of our freight forwarders.
ACHAG as a group or as an association educates members to be compliant.
The president of ACHAG, Yauche, said the association is ready to comply with all customs processes and also ensure that members exhibit professionalism in the discharge of their duties.
We keep on training ourselves. We admit the fact that we don't know all, that there are a lot of things we need to learn, that even when we enter freight forwarding, there's no any other school even to keep you updated, apart from the short courses at times you go for us. Protect our image, one as persons, and our businesses, and our association.
The managing director of SACO Shipyard Ghana has lamented what he describes as potentially avoidable challenges entrepreneurs operating medium and small enterprises go through in their quest to import goods into the country. According to him, some of these challenges are due to lack of knowledge of the freight market and other alternative opportunities. Speaking at the opening of the SACO shipping office in Ghana, he said, very often, small volume cargoes of shippers are loaded as full container loads, hence the importer ends up paying huge freight charges, which is avoidable. He said with SACO Shipping, a top global non-vessel owning common carrier services provider, finally opening in Ghana, shippers will enjoy some relief. The general manager of SACO Shipping Africa, Katharina Educat, said they will leverage on information technology to serve their customers.
What we believe in is that we want to have a good relationship and trust with our customers. We think that is very important to have modern IT support. That is what we implemented here in the office as well. And we saw why we are number one in Germany is because we have an excellent and trustful relationship with our customers.
There were some solidarity messages from stakeholders in the shipping industry.
In business today, everybody is looking at how best you can maximize profit and minimize cost. And if you have an operator who brings solutions to you, who have international connectivity and can take your burden off, that's what we are looking out for. Therefore, we are happy as Whitestone Shipbrokers to be associated with SACO Shipping, and also as an institution, the Institute of Chartered Shipbrokers, we promote professionalism throughout the world.
The Ghana Shippers Authority would like to assure you that as a state agency that supports the activities in the shipping industry, we are always ready to assist you with any help you require along your business activities, be it statistics or data, among others.
Again, I would say that they are very welcome. We're going to ensure that we give them the support that they require I've also mentioned that there will be programs that we would hold, so they will do their presentations. This is something we've always needed in this industry, and you are very welcome.
Yes, GPHA, indeed. You bring in the imports and ensure our exports.
The Ghana Ports and Harbours Authority has been conferred with the iconic Ports and Harbour Services Brand Award at the 9th Made in Ghana Awards 2022. This award was a recognition of GPHA's leadership role in the ports and logistics sector, one of the vibrant industries in Ghana. The 9th edition of the annual Made in Ghana Awards Gala Dinner 2022 was to honor and unveil a selection of iconic locally made products and services across sectors. This year's event, themed Ghana Beyond Imports, also saw the launch of the Buy, Eat, Drink campaign, aimed at creating the right awareness on the patronage of Ghanaian products and services towards nation building.
Iconic oil marketing brand of the year goes to Goil. We say Ayiko to you.
Indigenous oil marketing company Goil was also awarded as the iconic oil marketing brand of the year for its excellence in the petroleum sector.
So this one is to all Ghanaians, and also from to our MD and Group CEO, Honorable Kwame Osei-Prempeh, for his astute leadership. And we've come this far, and so congratulations to us all.
After a year of piloting the health management system, HMS, the Ghana Ports and Harbours Authority Hospital in Takoradi has gone paperless. The GPHA hospital has been positioned as the preferred health facility offering specialized health services needs within the secondary Takoradi metropolis. The health management system has been part of the GPHA management's strategic plan to put the health facility further as a second-to-none health delivering service. The human resource manager at the port of Takoradi, Peter Amubediako, at a brief ceremony said the GPHA hospital boasts of qualified health personnel in addition to the hospital being equipped with specialized medical equipment to provide quality healthcare services. The head of health services, Dr. George Teria Tindakabi, said the introduction of the HMS paperless system will help reduce material costs and improve turnaround time for clientele.
Physically, it improves our ability to take off our time in a short period of time.
The hospital administrator, Dr. Elena Tete, said the HMS paperless system will help the hospital perform efficiently.
But there's been a lot of successes that has come as a result of using the HMS. Our clients definitely are more happy because our processes have become more streamlined and shortened.
Selected personnel in the various sections of the hospital who were taken through skill training to be abreast with the HMS paperless system were awarded for their outstanding performance throughout the training period. The governing board of the Ghana Association of Quasi-Government Health Institutions, GACI, has held its maiden meeting at the Ghana Ports and Harbours Authority since its inauguration in May 2022. The quasi-government health institutions are health facilities operated by state-owned organizations whose core mandate is not only healthcare delivery. The 16-member board is chaired by the Chief Executive Officer of the Ghana Cocoa Board, Joseph Boayin Edu, with the Director General of the Ghana Ports and Harbours Authority, Michael Luguje, as the Vice Chairman. The meeting was used to deliberate on issues of concern to the association with the aim of providing quality, innovative, affordable, and accessible healthcare delivery to everybody in every part of the country. Joseph Boayin Edu charged members to strive to make their health facilities the preferred choice, considering the crucial role that they play in the delivery of healthcare services.
We are ahead in terms of equipment, in terms of logistics, ahead of the government institution, and also ahead of even the private sector to deliver. That puts us in a very unique position, and we have to strive to do more for us to become, the light, the star that everybody will be looking at for health services.
Other members called for collaboration between quasi-health facilities to achieve excellent health care.
All right, so those were happenings in the port and shipping industry in the course of the week. We're now going for the word of the day, which is designed to bring you up to speed with the terminologies and jargons we use in the shipping industry. Today's word is telex release. Telex release.
A telex release can be defined as a message that is sent by an agent or shipping line from the origin of the office at the customs destination. It can also be sent from an agent to signify that the shipper has already surrounded the original bill of lading issued to them.
You're welcome back. We're now taking a look into our discussion proper tonight. And tonight we're taking a look at threats to trade facilitation along the borders of West Africa. Now, one particular organization that has done a lot of work in this direction is the Borderless Alliance. They've been at the forefront of advocacy, advocating for the removal of barriers to trade and so on. And so tonight we are privileged to have the president of Borderless Alliance, Mr. Ziad Hamoui, in the studios. He decided to oblige us because of his relationship with the show. He is bereaved. He lost his mom a few weeks ago, barely 2 weeks ago. And so it was very difficult when we called upon him to oblige us to grace this occasion, this show, for us to discuss this topic. But graciously, he acceded and accepted to do so. And so we say our condolences to you, Mr. Hamoui, our sincerest sympathy to you and the family. And we pray that the good Lord will strengthen you and the family and grant you the strength and the grace to be able to stand this loss. And would like to assure you that we are with you each step of the way as we take steps to give a befitting burial to Mom. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for the kind words, and thank you for the invitation. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Right.
Indeed, these are tough times, but God has His ways, so
absolutely.
I have to move forward. So it's a pleasure to be here.
Right. Thank you very much indeed. We are taking a look at the threats to effective trade facilitation, along the borders of West Africa. And like I said in the intro, your organization, Borderless Alliance, has done a lot of work in this regard. First of all, I just want to explain to us the state of borders as we are now in West Africa.
So let me try to actually look at this by summarizing the synopsis of how it went a few years ago until we reached here, because since the time that COVID lockdown started in 2020 in March, and then borders for a while were closed for the movement of people, but we know that the commercial vehicles were still moving across West Africa even throughout the COVID lockdown.
Right.
And that doesn't mean that throughout the lockdown and the closure of the borders, trade and economic activities were not affected. In fact, border communities were some of those who were most severely affected in the reduction of their economic activity. And there were the smaller traders who were also frequently moving across the borders to sell their wares, affected. Commercial trade obviously was not affected, but the movement was actually...
Can you draw your microphone closer a bit? Yes, great.
So, yeah, so there was some effect for economic activity until December 11 of 2021, when the heads of state of ECOWAS decided that they were going to reopen the land borders as of January 2022. And then later on, as you remember, in March 2022, His Excellency the President, during his 28th COVID update, announced the formal reopening of the borders for the passage of the borders. But then again, keep in mind that because of the way borders are guided by their national authorities, once you lift the border for one side, it doesn't mean that you can automatically continue to the next side. So if, let's say, for example, Ghana and Togo don't automatically open their borders at the same time, you will cross from Ghana and then you get stuck before entering Togo, right? And so lucky for us that in May of 2022, Togo also followed suit of Ghana, and then in that case, they opened their borders. So some borders, as it stands, are still closed, except for commercial vehicles. Some borders have reopened. Some other borders have been affected beyond COVID. For example, in Mali, we had a coup in August 2020. Then we had a coup in Guinea in September 2021. In Burkina Faso, we had a coup in January 2022. So there are effects beyond the direct health and safety pandemic which was going on, which also led to a delay with the normalization of the normal movement across borders in West Africa. As we stand at the moment, we don't have freely open borders for the movement of people, but we still have that one for the commercial goods. And it's difficult in the sense that it affects transit trade, not just specifically because of COVID, but also because of several global shocks that took place. For example, the ongoing Ukraine crisis, which has affected the prices of food, fuel, and fertilizer across the world, which has led to a certain impact on the flow, the normal or regular flow of goods across the world. And it has affected us in some way. So there are internal, in summary, there are internal reasons, and there are regional reasons, and then there are international reasons why so far we have not normalized the movement of goods and people across our borders in West Africa.
And that's coming on the back of COVID, like you said.
Well, yes, and I would say that while we were trying to resuscitate our economies beyond COVID, came the Ukraine crisis, and then this led to a protracted situation. And it's not the easiest of time that we find ourselves at the moment, where global shocks because of currency fluctuations, because of energy price fluctuations, because of freight fluctuations. I realized last week, for example, we had a team of negotiators from Ghana who were negotiating freight, for example, for the cocoa upcoming season. That was a difficult one, by the way. So there's a lot of uncertainty. And uncertainty makes it difficult to plan ahead, either with your own personal movements across the region, but also with the movement of commercial goods. So even if the corridors are open for the movement of commercial vehicles, but there is still that difficulty with the movement of people. And until there is this movement of people, because people move where trade moves, and trade cannot move by itself. So until we get to a time where we have a normalization of this, then we can start to see how to plan ahead and to anticipate and to address some of the challenges which are being imposed onto the movement of goods and people across the region.
Okay, you mentioned in your submission that some of the borders are still closed. Some countries have been reopened.
For example, if you want to go to Cote d'Ivoire, you can't. You can leave Elubo, but then you get stuck there. Then you have to come back.
You have to come back. Are you aware what the reasons are for their refusal to open the borders?
So look, we were talking earlier about some circumstances that took place beyond the control of the national countries, and of course, the opening and closure of border is a sovereign decision.
Absolutely.
That lays at the head of the country. And having said that, even though the ECOWAS meeting was clear that the heads of state approved of the reopening of the borders as of January 2022, in a way it is not necessarily binding to open the borders as of January 2022, but of course there are reasons that extend beyond the simple issue of the technicalities of reopening borders. Obviously, there's a growing threat that is coming from the Sahel, with an increased frequency of violence and terrorist attacks taking place across the Sahel. So it might be one of the reasons in the back of the minds of the decision makers of why to delay with the reopening of the borders, why they figure out exactly how to contain some of these security threats in a way that does not affect their economic flows. Because, look, trade and you cannot separate trade from security, because without trade, without security, you can't have trade.
Absolutely.
You remember a few years ago the story of the two trucks which were carrying tile from the port of Takoradi heading towards Mali, stopped a little bit after the border of Burkina Faso at a checkpoint. They were negotiating some very petty amount of a couple of thousands of CFAs maybe. There was a difficulty in accepting 1,000 CFAs. Meanwhile, while they were haggling, terrorists came out,
yes,
killed 7 people, and then ran away. So
yes,
doing business in West Africa is risky,
yeah,
but also doing business in West Africa is a costly affair. So we have to understand that trade will be affected by security, but also the flip side of it is that without trade, you cannot have security.
yes,
Because trade comes with economic opportunities, and economic opportunities as it is across the world are challenged.
yes,
If you don't have food security, you'll end up with angry populations. If you don't have health security, you'll end up with sick people who are not able to work. So security and trade are inextricably attached to each
They're
other,
linked,
and then
yeah.
you have to attach them in a way that takes into consideration both at the same time. If we don't do this one, if we don't balance trade and security, then we will not be able to achieve the objectives of both, actually.
All right. You just mentioned, I'm interested in the security bit, and you just mentioned the fact that security and trade are inextricably linked, which I agree perfectly. I just want to find out from you, when you sit back and you observe how we go about trading along our borders, the element of security, is it there? Can people come out, shoulder high, chest out, and say we are doing business in an environment that's not risky?
So that's a very good question, actually, and it underlies something that is very important to emphasize, which is the fact that trade doesn't only take place at the official border crossings of countries across West Africa, whether in Ghana or in Cote d'Ivoire or others. So somebody who's carrying a pan load of goods will not walk, for example, all the way from the village where they are until the first official border crossing, and then they'll take that one, and then they'll move on to the journeys. The borders across West Africa, in general across Africa, are way too porous to be controlled effectively. Now, the reason you want to control the flows of trade is not just for security reasons, but for safety reasons also. Because trade is being carried by people, and so the safety of these people is also paramount. If you do not regulate it in a way that ensures the safety while addressing the security challenges of smuggling and contraband and all kinds of illicit trade that takes place across activity that takes place across borders, then there will be an issue.
Right.
So, in summary, in answer to your question, I think it's important to organize and to manage well the points where trade takes place and flows, especially through the borders. But we shouldn't be oblivious to the fact that there's a lot of trade that takes place across the borders, and it is not necessarily a bad thing to have informal trade flowing around. But it is a threat that needs to be identified, and you need to manage the risk level of these threats. I think the real challenge is to balance compliance against facilitation without compromising on safety or security. And this presumes that you have to make trade simple enough for informal traders to be able to use it. Don't make it too complicated for them otherwise, or too expensive. Because trade comes at a burden. So there has to be an administrative cost associated. So if you're an informal, so I talk a lot about informal traders because you know that about 70% of trade across West Africa is said to be informal trade, right? So formal trade is what it is. It has its legal sets of documentation for the cargo, for the drivers, for the vehicles. You pass through through a recognized border crossing. You show your documentation. You pass through. There are challenges. You solve your challenges. You move through. Most of the time, the economic operators have the capacity. Sometimes they lack the capacity. Sometimes they lack the knowledge. So these issues are well defined, and you can target them as they are. But it gets more gray area when it is informal, because you don't really know the volumes that are crossing through these borders because they are not being declared for various reasons. Right? And that is where the risk element is.
And that can also, even in terms of gathering data, it means that we'll be falling short.
It means that because simply a decision maker cannot make a good decision if he doesn't have good information. If you don't collect adequate data at the borders, then you don't have adequate information. And if you don't have good information, you can't make a good decision. That's simple.
Right.
And that is one of the weaknesses of our regional trade systems because of the high informality rate.
Right.
The lack of adequate data, or at least the unavailability of a well-collated regional data, because you can find out initiatives and centers of information collection that have some kind of information across the region, but it's just not centralized.
Right.
In Ghana, we might have, for example, ICOMS, which is collecting data for Ghana.
Yes.
But once you cross from Ghana to the other side, then who completes the rest of the journey to find out exactly how it's going from the other side? It's not necessarily as clear.
Right.
And so this kind of cross-border cooperation is very highly important in order to make sure that we address the issues of risk associated with the flows of trade and the cross-border trade. And that way, you lower the security profile and the risk profile of trade, and it becomes easier to balance compliance with facilitation.
Right. All right. Okay, so I mentioned earlier in my submission that your organization, Borderless Alliance, has done a lot of work, extensive work, in championing the removal of barriers to trade along our corridors. And I know a lot of people have brought complaints to you because they see you as an advocate, a champion of, free trade in our corridors. I just want to find out from you some of the issues that they bring to you when they come with their challenges.
So there are several categories of interventions for the Borderless Alliance on a country level, on a regional level, but also beyond that one. On a country level, Ghana and Borderless Alliance is headed in Ghana,
yes,
with 9 national committees across West Africa, having a national chapter in Ghana, among other countries. So these national committees and their members have this community that engages on issues of challenges in trade. And then we interact with our members and also with the business community as a general through, for example, the NTB platform, which are currently...
when you say NTB, what does that mean?
It is a non-tariff barrier.
Non-tariff barrier.
So it's an eNTB, which means it's an electronic non-tariff barrier platform.
Okay.
But it's easier to just call it the other name, which is West African Online Platform.
Okay.
Basically, it's a portal for registering complaints for when we are moving trade across the corridors.
Okay.
And we are operating it in Ghana and in Burkina Faso. At the moment, Ghana Shippers Authority is the lead on the implementation in Ghana.
Right.
And the Burkina Shippers Council is the lead in Burkina. So there is a website where you can register for free, and then you can register your complaints on it. And alternatively, there is a hotline that you can ring.
Do you have those
call.
details? Because as we go along, we can furnish the viewers with that. If somebody's watching, the fellow might want to cross-check. The fellow has complaints and would want to perhaps readily just send that complaint or seek some help of a form.
Even the eNTB platform number is made available freely. I'm trying to bring
open
it up
and get it.
So that will give the opportunity for people to use. But basically, they can dial 054-738-3875, and then they can speak to the administrator.
Go over it again.
That is 547-383875.
0547-383875.
Yes.
Okay.
And then they can have assistance on the other side.
Okay.
Now, of course, it can help with simple issues. Sometimes there is harassment unnecessarily. Sometimes there's a lack of the proper knowledge of the documentation required for trade. But most of the time, the challenges get resolved successfully. And it is manned by a focal point on behalf of Ghana Shippers Authority, which is connected to focal points within the various local government agencies in order to make, whether it is, for example, the axleway bridges, or the police, or immigration, or customs, or the other Food and Drugs Authority and others. Right. And that helps to resolve some of the issues more or less in real time. And this is one of the services that we provide in country, especially in Ghana and Burkina. We also operate a chain of border information centers across the region.
Yes.
Now, the centers which are at Aflao, Paga, and Noe have been successfully handed back to the Ghana Shippers Authority, which has integrated them into its Ghana Shippers Complaint Unit and has been operating for a while successfly. And then regionally, some of the services we provide have to do with the interactions with the ETLS task force, which monitors the movement of goods and people.
ETLS, that's the ECOWAS Trade Liberalization Scheme.
So the task force for the monitoring of the free movement of goods and people under the ECOWAS trade liberalization scheme, and it's a mouthful. So we call it usually the ETLS task force, which is headed by His Excellency Dr. Ibn Chambers, and monitors the state of the implementation of the ECOWAS Facilitation agreement, basically, across the region. So we interact with them regularly with some complaints on country basis. And then we have our annual conferences and our various national workshops and events where we bring in the stakeholders and we offer this advocacy platform where we engage with the policymakers and the policy takers, which are the economic operators, the organized private associations and others. And then we highlight challenges and then we push for some changes and for some action to be taken in certain areas that will reduce some of the time or the cost associated with doing the business. And that is the modus operandi of Borderless Alliance, based on advocacy mostly.
Right. Oh, beautiful. Okay, that's awesome. Let me find out from you what you make of our quest to facilitate trade in our borders as a country in Ghana. I mean, we are told on a daily basis that our quest to facilitate trade is fraught with a lot of challenges. You just mentioned some of them. We talked about security a while ago and all that. What do you make of the processes so far in our quest to facilitate trade at our borders and entry points?
So look, maybe at this point...
That's a general assessment, so to speak.
So maybe at this point in time, it might be helpful if we step back and just attempt to define trade facilitation, just to be on page among ourselves as we are discussing also with the audience. And the WTO and UNCTAD define trade facilitation as the simplification and harmonization of international trade procedures. And so basically, trade facilitation is most relevant when you are engaged in international trade and you are crossing borders, whether you are bringing in goods or taking out goods from one country to the other through the ports or through the borders, then trade facilitation becomes very relevant because you need to make sure that the documentation is being processed in the fastest way across borders as you move from one customs authority to the other. And the assumption is that these customs authority operate along similar procedures. But most of the time, for a country like Ghana, for example, surrounded by Francophone countries which have a completely different culture on how to go about with their procedures, from small things like the opening times at borders to non-mutual recognition of some of the documentation and the permits that are required for you to move your goods clearly, to the imposition sometimes of some certain administrative charges or levies or documentation on some goods that are locally originating. And so sometimes you feel that you are talking about regional integration, but sometimes you watch it and you think about regional disintegration.
Right.
But I would say that the experience of West Africa in general within ECOWAS has been a mixed bag. Some countries have been making headways with regards to the simplification and harmonization of their procedures. Right. So connecting, for example, setting up a single window which is a one-stop shop for all of the procedures for your trade, to providing information, trade information to the economic operators. All of these help towards enhancing trade. Right. And so Ghana has been involved in several of these activities in order to make trade easier at borders. But of course, I'm not saying that automatically this puts us ahead of the group. Obviously, some countries have different challenges in different areas. Some countries have less challenges in other areas. And so it becomes a little bit difficult when you try to compare. But I think it will be easier to track the performance of particular countries when you establish a firm and scientifically established baseline. For example, in the case of Ghana, for a few years now, we have been trying to encourage the government of Ghana to come up with a time release study.
Right.
And that means that it is a scientifically based and well-measured study that tells you exactly how much time and cost it takes when you are spending goods all the way from entering the country until it gets to its destination. Once you have this kind of study in place and you set it up and it's exhaustive, then all you have to do is to make sure that you periodically review how these various elements tally up in comparison to the base year.
Yeah.
And it makes it easier to you to say, well, process number 18, which used to take this many hours, is now increased to this many. So what's going on? Let's investigate.
Yeah.
And then you go about it like this, and then you maintain it, and then you enhance it, and you improve it as you are moving.
Yes.
At the moment, we don't have it. But there are some good news.
My understanding from the Ghana Revenue Authority 2 weeks ago, I had in the studios a deputy commissioner from the Customs Division, GRA, who indicated that they were all set to roll out the time release study. So I'm pretty certain.
And that is true. And that is true. They were technically ready.
Yes.
But they were waiting for the go ahead, because it's not all technical. And I guess what comes to my mind is something that was whispered in my ear when we were having a conference in Lomé, when the AFCFTA Secretariat organized an Abidjan-Lego forum for the ministers of trade and the senior trade officials. And we're talking about some of these issues, and I was privileged to be member of the Borderless Alliance team, which was contributing our experience from the Abidjan-Lagos corridor and some of the challenges and the suggestions and recommendations. And I happened to venture on behalf of the economic operators in Ghana on a request and a question directed towards the Minister of Trade of Benin.
Right.
And I asked it in French in two different ways because the economic operators wanted to find out what can they do in order to cross the borders because they were having their difficulties at the time, as you know. And then somebody came and told me there are technical issues and there are non-technical issues. And today we are here to solve the technical issues. And so it's not trade facilitation is not just about the technicality of how to get trade cheaper and take less time. Right. It's also about mobilizing the political will to implement the changes and the reforms that are required to enhance the system. You recall a few years back in 2017 when we had the Port Efficiency Conference, which was patronizing Ghana at the level of the presidency in Ghana. And that is where the paperless came in, and that is where the directives started to come about to digitize trade and to reduce the number of checkpoints and thereon. So that particular point in time was a watershed moment for
That was
Ghana.
when the vice president issued a caveat that there should not be more than 10 barriers.
At the time, actually, he asked that the customs barriers would be reduced to zero.
Yeah, okay.
If you recall.
Okay.
And then later on, after reviewing and the ECOWAS protocol, which allowed for 2, and then came up the addendum that where we can have 2 because the ECOWAS protocol.
So is that the situation now?
It's different.
So
I would say it's a bit different.
There are more.
There are more than 2, obviously. We haven't had a verification trip for a while. The last time that we had a verification trip a while ago in collaboration with Ghana Shippers Authority, we found out that there was closer to about 75.
75 customs checkpoints?
Not customs checkpoints.
Okay.
So we're talking about checkpoints in general.
Police.
No. As of how many of these are customs, that is what I have to check with you and find out. Because sometimes some of these checkpoints are officially sanctioned.
Absolutely.
Some of them they are mobile. Some of them they are only manned during the nighttime. Some of them during the daytime. Some of them are unidentified checkpoints. There are many of these. But how many of these are checkpoints? That is something that we have to double check.
I think the police makes up the most. The police makes up, because on this particular show, a lot of people have called to tell us,
especially on some of
with the police on the routes. Yeah,
that is true. Especially on some of the stretches where there are more incidents of criminal activity that take place, somewhere between Kintampo and Techiman, for example.
Sure.
But at the same time, it is a self-fulfilling prophecy. So if you say that this is a hotspot and then now increase security and that people know that people are there, so that that's a different thing altogether. But the important point is that from a trade perspective, it has always been difficult to reconcile the priorities between the security concerns and the trade concerns. Because obviously security takes precedence over all other kinds of activities.
Absolutely.
And that makes it difficult to get to a suitable middle point where you have adequate security in exchange for adequate facilitation. And that is what you were talking maybe earlier on when you mentioned trade facilitation versus security without compromising on security. It is a tough balancing act. But I do believe that at the bottom of it all, you have to look at your risk element. And you have to enhance your risk profiling for the trade activity. And then based on that risk profiling, you address the core root of the problem. And once you address it successfully, then you will lower the risk of trade and security issues. And once you lower the risk and security aspect, it makes it easier to balance facilitation with compliance. Because here's the thing. We know that some traders are compliant, but we also know that other traders are non-compliant. On the other hand, we know that some of the agencies are not facilitating the business, even if you are fully compliant. And it takes a negotiation sometimes. It takes an engagement, a discussion. And sometimes money exchanges hands. Sometimes you have to make a difficult decision between accepting incurred economic loss due to an overstay in a particular position, and then you have to make a difficult choice on point. And sometimes you have to make it a point that you do not tolerate some of these activities. So it gets a little bit difficult sometimes, especially when you're on the ground. I mean, it's easy to sit down in the studio and say, well, you have a choice, and then you can say no, you can refuse corruption. But when you are on the point, when it's nighttime, when your goods are being, what do you do? It's difficult.
Okay, so I know the Borderless Alliance has done a lot of things to draw government attention to the need to ensure that we facilitate trade in such a way that people will do it seamlessly and there will be fluid flow of trade along our corridors. You made mention earlier on in your submission that it was risky in terms of security to trade along our West African corridors, and it was costly. And that's what we have to pay in terms of corruption. You just mentioned corruption again. I just want to find out from you what you have done as Borderless Alliance to draw government's attention to some of these anomalies in terms of our quest to facilitate trade, and what the response of government has been all this while.
So there's also the element of the fees and charges which are associated, which has an additional cost of doing business, right? So we have been engaging in our national commissions, in the national committees across West Africa with the authorities in our respective countries to review the fees and the charges at the points of destination. And also we have accompanied the economic operators in order to ensure that they do not have to incur any additional fees and charges, especially illicit ones, so that will reduce the cost of doing business. Now, we have been engaging in consultative or advisory capacities on a national level, but we have also been doing that one on a regional level by interacting with ECOWAS Commission itself, to the various departments, for example, when it comes to the implementation of the ETLS itself agreement for products which are registered in a particular country, eligible to move across West Africa duty-free, and then you come into problems, and then you have to look at ways to solve your issues. Then we also help these economic operators to streamline their complaints in order to successfully resolve the blockages in the system so that their goods can flow across the region. We have been interacting with with the border agencies on regular basis, either in the form of the dissemination of the information that have to do, for example, with the common external tariff, or with the documentation that are required by the economic operators to move across borders. You'll be surprised to know that, for example, sometimes some of the delays happens because the agents, not just that the economic operators are not very aware of the procedure, but sometimes the agents themselves are not too aware. And they have to await for the instructions to come from the nearest regional or head office to come before they can go ahead. And that costs time. Sometimes time has a cost element involved in it, not just the money involved. So we have been working on all of these various capacities, first of all in policy engagements with governments, consultative facility, and also in fostering dialogue across borders. So cross-border cooperation has been something we have been doing extensively, because it has done to us that most of the times you cannot resolve a problem related to international trade by addressing the issue specifically in the country where you are. Sometimes the issue either terminates or originates across your border.
Right.
And so you need to have this kind of cross-border collaboration in order to identify the challenge and to resolve this challenge. And the network of partners and members of the Borderless Alliance allows the ease of moving this information across in the system in order to make sure that the decision makers know of the challenges, but at the same time that the action trickles all the way down from the decision-making centers to the implementation centers, most likely across the borders.
All right, so you just made mention of the issue of money changing hands and all that. I just want to, we'll go for a break, but when we come back, I'll find out from you how rampant that is, because it looks like that's the most common, illicit activity on our, on our corridors. Because a lot of drivers complain, a lot of truckers complain. They have to go and then bribe somebody before they're allowed to pass and all those things. So please note it down. This is Iron Port viewers here on Metro TV, and we are discussing threats that inhibit the smooth facilitation of trade along our borders in West Africa. With me in the studios, Mr. Ziad Hamoui, who is president of the Borderless Alliance. And we're going for a quick break. When we bounce back, we'll continue the show. Please do stay with us.
Every now and again, Goil makes good things happen. This time, Goil has introduced Super XP Ron 95, a higher grade fuel loaded with additives and yet sold at the same price as normal fuel. Goil Super XP Ron 95 enhances engine performance like never before. It maintains the engine by keeping it clean from carbon deposits. Goil Super XP Ron 95 is designed to burn slowly and thus improves fuel economy, making you save money after several kilometers. Goil Super XP Ron 95 gives you a smooth driving experience, that is, less vibrations. Fill up with Goil Super XP Ron 95. Now there's no need to pay more for any higher grade fuel. Goil has that sorted. Goil, good energy.
Electricity, then pay your taxes. Our taxes, our future.
Because you see, without our taxes, we wouldn't have good roads, good schools, better hospitals, street lights, and other very important social amenities. When we pay our taxes, we give our children free and quality education. Talga, my money too small. Why should I pay my tax? Look, small. Salifo, it doesn't matter how small or big your business or income is. You still have to pay your taxes. The little taxes from each and every one of us, when put together, could give your community clean water or that deprived school with tables and chairs. Please pay your taxes. It is your responsibility. It is your civic duty. It is the law.
Impressive factory. If only I had listened to you, I wouldn't have been in this mess. That devastating fire virtually wiped out the whole factory and my warehouse. Remember my misfortunes last year? Serene Insurance Asset All Risks Fire policy that I took were there to pay for my damaged stocks in the warehouse, and my machines that were affected by the floods have been replaced. My accident vehicle is back on the road thanks to Serene Insurance motor policy. Currently, my goods are on the high seas, covered with their marine cargo insurance policy. I was just telling Ajima about Serene Insurance. Oh, Ajima, tell him more.
As a road contractor, I make sure I do my contractors all risk insurance for the project, and then workers' compensation for all the workers on site. With Serene Insurance, they will make sure they will cover your unknown tomorrow today.
Serene Insurance, a new face of insurance. Call us now.
Mps Terminal 3 is Africa's new state-of-the-art container terminal at Tema Port. For manufacturers, agro-processors and traders, the new port means business can be done faster. This infrastructure boost will improve Ghana's port handling capacity, connect more trading routes, and oil the engine of growth for the economy, creating greater opportunities across all sectors as Africa's markets merge and become the largest trading bloc globally. MPS, we connect, you thrive.
All right, so you're welcome back. I announced to you that tonight we're discussing the threats that inhibit the smooth facilitation of trade along our corridors in West Africa. And with me in the studio is Mr. Ziad Hamwi, President, Borderless Alliance. And I also want to indicate that our lines have been activated. You can phone in and contribute to the discussion. The number to dial is 020-552-8353. 020-552-8353. Pretty shortly, we shall also be going into the inbox to share your messages with the rest of the world. Before we went on the break, Mr. Hamwi, I told you that I was going to come and then I told you to chew on the fact that a lot of people complain of extortion along our borders. How rampant is this phenomenon?
So I have two parts of the question, of the answer.
Right.
The first one is that, logically speaking, if you were fully compliant all the time, there would be absolutely no reason for you to worry about being harassed.
Right.
And unfortunately, it is not the culture of the economic operators or the truckers or the drivers within West Africa to be fully compliant in terms of their loads or their personal documentation of their vehicles documentation. For some reason, and that is something that we need to work on by capacity building. Because if you don't offer the opportunity to be extorted, then with time it will die away and people will find some other way to make money.
Right.
But if people are making money out of your own complacency, in either ignorance or complacency, maybe in keeping up to
non-adherence to the rules.
Non-adherence to the rules is most of the time an entrenched behavior. So that is one component of the corruption argument.
So on this particular component, you think that once the drivers become aware and they play by the rules, they have all the requisite documents and papers.
Then
once they get there, they'll be allowed to pass, and so there'll be no issue of asking for money, money exchanging hands.
Not exactly that. However, the frequency of getting harassed becomes less because simply once you know that you haven't done anything wrong and people attempt to harass you, then there are lines of assistance that you can seek and people can help you to get out of that problem. Right? So that is why I'm saying once you are compliant,
this happens consistently, naturally this phenomenon will die down.
Yes. Because you can help people who are compliant, but you can't really get to the point and find out that there's a driver who was held up because his license has expired.
Right.
And then you can't really use a hotline or a website to help a driver who has been driving along for the past year with an expired license.
Yep.
That is not something that has to do with advocacy at all.
Absolutely.
In fact, that is one of the issues that we try our best to exercise due diligence in finding out what the backdrop is for some of the complaints that you receive. So you find out, first of all, whether whoever is calling is sure that he has been fully compliant at the moment where the incident happens. And most of the time, the answer is not an exact black or white. So sometimes we invite extortion by our own lack of action. Now, the other component of the corruption discussion is if you had a strong enforcement of the regional regulations on national level, then you don't have to worry too much about the misinterpretations and the gray area where you can interpret some of these laws at your will. And unfortunately, within West Africa, there's very low level of enforcement of the regional regulations, whether it has to do with the free movement of goods or the free movement of people or other regulations that are approved and signed by the heads of state at the highest levels across the region. But then when you come back to your country and you try to implement it, you say, in fact, it cannot be implemented because so and so, or we weren't sure we are going to implement it this way.
Right.
And one example in this case, for example, is the axleway. The regional axle weight. How many times did we have a false start from the past 10 years?
Right.
And up to today, we still don't have a set date about when we are going to act in unity across West Africa to begin with the rolling out and the enforcement of a standardized way of axle load verification across West Africa.
Right.
right? So this is the other part of the problem. We don't have sanction mechanisms for officers who flout the regional regulation for various reasons. Mostly the inability to enforce sanctions beyond your own country's borders, even though ECOWAS is a group of 15 countries.
Yes.
It's not the ECOWAS way, the customary way of enforcing sanctions beyond the borders.
Yes.
And that's actually a weakness because, in fact, we don't have a well-regulated dispute resolution mechanism for economic operators who have challenges or complaints, but we also don't have an internal mechanism to interdict some of the local officers or government agencies who have misimplemented or didn't enforce the implementation of the regulations in the way they were meant to be.
Right.
And so this is how I see the entire argument around corruption. So and I sort of agree with the argument that is regularly presented by the law enforcement agencies, which say that it takes two people for corruption to take place.
The giver and the taker.
Thank you. But in most of the cases, it's not just the desire of a giver to give and a taker to take. It's actually more of a negotiation that takes place.
Absolutely.
And it all comes back to our inability or our unawareness about what it takes to be fully compliant and to observe the rules and the regulations. So yes, within ECOWAS as a region, we have rights, but yes, we also have obligations to follow the rules in the countries in which we are operating. And only when we follow the rules and we are compliant can we expect to have facilitation.
Right.
And that has always been the argument balancing back and forth about the uniformed authorities saying that you are not compliant. And then the economic operators saying that the uniformed authority is not facilitating.
Right.
So you need to balance these carefully against each other.
Okay. All right. Once again, I would like to announce that the phone lines have been activated. The number to dial is 020-552-8353, 020-552-8353. You can call in and contribute to the discussion. Now we're going to the inbox, and this one takes us to the issue of illicit trade along our borders and how that is also exacerbating the already precarious situation that we find ourselves. Now this one says, please, about 2 days ago, I was at Sogakope barrier and videoed how motorbike or Okada riders smuggled goods, that is evading taxes or tax along the Sogakope enclave. This one is from Wilson Quist, who sent it in. I think he's watching at the moment. And so the issue of illicit trade, tell us about it and how it is hampering, those who are the work of those who are doing trade, genuinely, and using all the right means to make a living.
Look, illicit trade is illicit. There's no way of looking around smuggling. You cannot excuse smuggling.
Right.
Because smuggling is basically creating an environment where there is revenue leakage and then there is corruption in the system.
Right.
And it is an unhealthy thing. So we condemn it as Borderless Alliance, but also as citizens. However, illicit trade takes place. First of all, illicit trade should not be equated to informal trade.
Right.
And that is an argument
those are
which
two separate things.
Very separate
things. We have to draw that dichotomy.
Informal trade, and I have to emphasize that informal trade is not illegal trade. There is illicit trade and there's informal trade. Somebody who's carrying yams and cassava and textile that is coming from one country to the other to sell across the borders, that is not illicit trade. Now, when you are moving gallons of fuel across borders because it costs more in country X than country Y, and then that is where, or tobacco.
Yes.
Or worse, sometimes you are not just smuggling goods. Sometimes you are smuggling worse things. Sometimes you are smuggling weapons.
Yes.
Sometimes explosives.
Narcotics.
Sometimes exactly, yes. And sometimes human trafficking.
Right.
So things happen at borders in West Africa. And I'm just back from Paris from a conference at the OECD about trade and security in the Sahel. And there are lots of issues taking place, especially around border areas. So it's not because it is informal that it is illicit, but yes, smuggling takes place due to low level of enforcement. My question for whoever saw smugglers, quote unquote, in Sogakope is why didn't the officers interdict them?
Yeah.
Sogakope is very far away from Aflao.
Yes.
So did you really move all the way from Sogakope to the border and nobody saw you? That is a huge assumption to make. And there are lots of answers to that.
Yeah.
So Gakupe is very far away from Aflao. I mean, as I said, illicit trade is condemned. But illicit trade is not the same as informal trade.
Yes.
And of course, our hope is to make sure that we create a simplified trade regime for informal traders to move their businesses more from the darkness into at least a gray area or an approved way of doing business in a way that is a win-win for both their own businesses and the state they operate in. But illicit trade is just illicit.
Now that you've drawn a dichotomy, fill us in and give us a sense of what is happening in terms of illicit trade along our borders in West Africa.
Well, look.
Do you have an idea? And what they primarily they are engaged in?
All I can say is because, we don't regularly monitor illicit trade. We barely monitor legal trade, actually, to begin with. But with illicit trade, all I can say is that because of the crazy jump in the global prices of fuel, food, and fertilizer, among many other things, you will expect that people will attempt to move these goods undeclared across borders in order to achieve illicit gains or gain unfair competitive advantages over each other. So yes, illicit trade will take place, especially when prices are very volatile, and especially when you do not have the capacity to monitor what is going on across your country more closely. There are many sources and origins for the illicit trade. There is trade that comes into the country as official trade and then somehow magically metamorphoses into and finds itself across the border.
Yeah.
There are goods that are undeclared to begin with and enter into the country and then continue into another country. And so there are lots of mechanisms and there are lots of challenges which prevent actually the control of these illicit trades, one of which is the unholy alliance between those who are actually implementing or enforcing the regulations and those who are actually conducting the trade. When the law enforcer and the law taker join hands in order to commit nefarious activity, that is where you have to conduct due diligence within the authorities and to review the integrity of your agents. And I'm not just talking about a particular country, I'm talking in general, right? And at the same time, we have to come back to what we were talking earlier about the risk management. You have to identify not just the trade, the people who are trading. Because it's easy enough to determine the profile of the people who are trading if you can identify them through their entities as a company or through their entities as an identification document.
Right.
And some of these, it's a whole episode that we can talk about identifying and reducing the risk of trade and people, actually. But basically, people trade, and then they are the ones who will connive to make sure that the illicit trade reaches its destination.
All right, so I know that Borderless Alliance has conducted a lot of studies. You have done so along our borders and all that. Can you share with us some of the findings that you came up with and what these studies primarily were focused on?
So that's an interesting question, and I was hoping that I could formally answer that one after the finalization of the publication of a recent submission we did around addressing trade facilitation in the context of AFCFTA. Obviously, views from the Borderless Alliance with particular concern at the borders.
Right.
And so this particular submission is based on the many years and activities that we have conducted as Borderless Alliance. And we have basically come up with 5 main challenges and with recommendations.
Okay. All right, before we continue, Mr. Hamwe, let's go on to the phone lines and welcome Wilson. I understand he's calling from Accra, if I got the name right. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Yes, please shoot.
Yeah, I'm actually enjoying this program.
Thank you.
Because, and I sent a message that I would like to meet the CEO, or even if I have to work with them, because I haven't worked with this security sector for some time.
Okay.
Along the borders, or along the Aflao to Abidjan, you realize that there are a lot of issues that the government have to deal with, and you cannot do 100%. Because at times, it's not the custom officers who extort money, but the indigents, the people around, help the smugglers. There are a lot of loopholes along the coast, which some of us who live there and know about it can help this group to actually work on. When you are traveling from the Aflao enclave to Accra, there are a lot of places that you can park with drugs, and all those things. That is, some people don't know unless you deal with the local people who have stayed there and know the in and out of the place.
Right.
Therefore, to ascertain or to know a lot about these things, you need to get some people within to give you the information. You are at a SACO barrier.
Okay.
And then, as a custom officer, the motor cadre went and charged somebody with a huge amount of money to transport something through the river or on a motorbike. How will you know?
Right.
You have to be very vigilant to actually know that this is what is going on. I don't know whether you are getting what I'm trying to say.
I appreciate it so much. Yes, I get it.
So you are there, and then he passed with the thing. And I have the video, but I can only share with him when I meet him one-on-one.
Right. Okay.
So you realize that the guy passed with other drugs, other anything, because the people who are working now, they are afraid to use the drug on the plane, but they find it easy to go through the road. And it's only intelligence or people around that can give you that information.
Right.
And you cannot do 100% arrest. There's no way that they can be 100% arrest. So if you are talking about collecting money, you also talk about the people who help the smugglers and those drug people to put the thing also through.
Absolutely. Agreed.
So it's not only the officers or the police people, but the people, those local people, the indigents, they are also the problem.
Okay.
Not until you join hands with the chiefs and opinion leaders in the town to talk to them, educate them that the taxes that the government collects used to develop. So if you are collecting and putting it in your pocket, how do you expect the government to come and do your roads, your pipe, and schools and other things for you?
Great. Thank you very much indeed. Please don't go behind the scenes. My production team will take your number and furnish it with Mr. Ziyad so that he would reach you, and then you guys can have a meeting, set up a meeting, and then you take it up from there. Thank you very much, Wilson, who is calling us all the way here in Accra. We're appreciative of your call. The number to dial is 02055283553. You can also call in and contribute to the discussion. Yes, Mr. Hamui, you were at the verge of telling us what you have done as Borderless Alliance, in terms of studies along our corridors when the call came through.
That is true, and I was thinking about what Wilson just provided with, and there were so many ideas, right? And the first thing I thought about was the anecdotal word that we heard from some customs authorities across borders in West Africa, that people were unhappy with the reopening of the borders because now the business of moving people across the border was no longer lucrative. Business was actually booming for the illicit traders when the borders were closed, and now their business was coming down. So he reminded me of that particular thing. But I would really like to come back and discuss with him fully with what we said.
Yes.
But first, the 5 recommendations which I was talking about, and I'll just summarize them quickly. We can go into more details, and I'll share that once it becomes officially
Quickly, we have
published.
barely 4 minutes to wrap up.
Yeah. So there is a lack of adequate border infrastructure.
Okay.
There is an entrenched culture of gender bias. And there is an absence of adequate information desks. And then there is an informal nature of cross-border trade, which we talked about earlier today. And finally, there's a lack of a proper dispute resolution system.
Right.
And so for these 5 challenges, which we have mentioned based on our experience, we thought about addressing cross-border infrastructure, breaking the gender bias in trade, addressing information deficiencies, formalization via enhanced trade data collection, and finally dispute settlement under the AFCFTA.
Okay.
So these are the main findings.
The findings that you have. So rich, I wish we could expatiate on them, but I think that we're running out of time. So let's go on to the phone lines and welcome Mr. Reverend Jesse onto the show. Good evening, sir. Hello, Rev. Okay, I understand he's off. So, yes.
Maybe now we can at least talk about the Aflao Abidjan.
Yes.
And it's important for a reason, because he mentioned so many very, very critical points. The first of which is trust.
Yes.
Between the citizen and the law enforcement agency.
Right.
If that trust is not available, then there will not be a cooperation either within the country or across a border.
Yes.
And trust is most relevant at border communities, because borders are the first line of defense against the infiltration of unwanted agents.
Yeah.
We are thankful that in Ghana we have vigilance, but it's not enough. Vigilance is not enough. We have to build this trust.
Yes.
There's a lack of economic opportunity in the country, and that forces people to informalize, first of all, and second, to seek different modes of making money, and sometimes, unfortunately, it is an illicit trade. So what do you do when there are no economic opportunities and the only options are illicit?
Yes.
That's a very big conundrum to solve. And finally, we have to work effectively on building the relationship between the border agencies and the economic operators, but also with the border communities themselves, in order to enforce their resilience and to foster an environment where they can thrive while helping you defend your borders.
Okay. All right. I understand we have, is it Bright or Brian from Kumasi? Good evening, sir. Hello? Oh, he's also off. I think our lines today are not helping us at all.
Oh, they are too busy.
Yes. So this one says, good evening. I'm Ishmael from Aflao. Okay, I think we have the fellow on the line. Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
Yes, sir. You are our last caller. Please just be snappy a bit for us. What's the name?
Okay.
And where are you calling from?
I'm Seth calling from Upper West.
Upper West?
Yes, please.
You are who?
I'm Seth.
Okay.
Seth, calling.
Seth,
Katuma.
Katuma. All right. Berai. Let's flow.
Yeah, what I wanted actually to talk about is, sometimes the man talked about changing hands.
Money changing hands, yes. Money
changing hands. Definitely. Sometimes when we are talking about the security aspect of it, the security personnel sometimes definitely will not ask you to drink. But because you know you are doing the wrong thing, you would like to come and change hands with him so that he will side with you for you to go.
Yeah.
So I think let's make sure that our drivers that are applying the road, that are applying the borders, also do the right thing, move with the right vehicles, move with the right goods. Are you getting me? Definitely, if you are moving at the right direction, no policeman or no custom officer will collect your money.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you very much.
If your license is correct, nobody will collect your money.
Great. We understand it. Thank you very much. We appreciate you, Seth, all the way from my home region, Upper West. This one says, good evening. I'm Ishmael from Aflao. I think it will be very difficult for security agencies to curb extortion because most of the traders want to cut corners. Well, I agree with you. Mr. Hamui, I don't think we have any much more time. We just have to wrap up. But we thank Seth for his contribution. We thank the other caller, Wilson, also for calling in. We'll just have to say a big thank you to our sponsors, Ghana Revenue Authority, Goil Company Limited, Readiness Insurance, Ghana Link Network Services, and indeed Meridian Port Services for the good job they are doing. And we also thank the Ghana Ports and Harbours Authority for powering the show. Maximum thanks to our executive producers, Madam Esther Jebidonko and Nana Esi Soderberg Kwanzaa. Indeed, we would entreat you to watch the abridged version of the show, which is on GTV every Wednesday at 8:30 p.m. I would like to say thank you to Mr. Ziad Hamui, President Borderless Alliance, for obliging us and coming. And we would entreat you to keep watching the rest of our programs and have a very, very super week ahead. The name is Kennedy Mona. God willing, next week we shall bounce back with another wonderful edition of the show. Good evening.